Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to another Between Takes episode of Missing Frames. I'm your host, Sean Eastridge. Now, as you may know, or maybe you don't know this, normally on Missing Frames, we watch all of the movies we should have seen by this point in our lives. But these Between Takes episodes give me kind of an excuse to do things outside of that standard concept. So we do franchise watches with the Franchise Boys, Brad Gullickson and Aaron Prescott. Make sure to check those out. We also do film festival coverage, interviews, and what we are doing right now is Celebrating Superman. That's right, the Celebrating Superman series. It is a series in which I will be interviewing just a number of amazing Superman people, from writers and artists to crazy fans like me, and it's all just building excitement, anticipation for James Gunn's Superman, which will be released on July 11th. Why is that so far away? Does it feel like, I know it's just a few months, but it feels like it's too far away. Anyway, sorry. Today we are continuing this series with none other than one of Superman's fearless creative leaders, and that would be Mike Carlin. Who is Mike Carlin, you say? Well, I'm so glad you asked. First and foremost, the guy basically oversaw Superman through the 80s and 90s. He served as the group editor for Superman comics, and that role earned him an Eisner Award. So, these are all things that I would consider legendary. He oversaw the work of these incredible writers and artists, people like John Byrne, Dan Jurgens, Jerry Ordway, Roger Stern, Louise Simonson, Jon Bogdanove. People, I can't list them all. There are so many people that were involved in this. It's an incredible dream team of comic book talent. These folks created characters like John Henry Irons, aka Steel, who you may recall was played to perfection by Shaquille O'Neal in the 1997 classic film. They also did something else you may be familiar with, which is the historic death and return of Superman story arc, which has gone down as one of the greatest stories of all time, not just in Superman, but in all of comics. So many of the stories that this team wrote, that Mike Carlin oversaw, shaped Superman into what he is known as today. The creative decisions this team made reflected not only in future comic book runs, but in TV shows like Smallville, like the animated Superman series, Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. Talk about classic. We're even seeing big influences and homages to this triangle era in James Gunn's upcoming Superman film. So really, it was such an amazing honor to talk with Mike about Superman and just like how he got into comics, what made him fall in love with Superman, how he ended up joining the team at DC while John Byrne was doing his legendary reboot of the character. We talk about the challenges of writing Superman. The whole team really wanted to make Superman relevant and exciting for a new generation of comic readers in an era where Batman had kind of stolen a lot of the thunder. Batman continues to steal a lot of the thunder from Superman, but that was one of their goals. Of course, I would be remiss if we did not discuss the death of Superman and how that came about and just kind of what the fan reaction to that was. Some angry phone calls came as a result of that decision. Mike recalls a very funny story of Harlan Ellison paying him a phone call late one night, just completely unprompted. And of course, Mike has some advice for James Gunn. James Gunn is essentially doing the role that Mike did for over a decade on Superman and then eventually DC Comics. So it was a real treat to talk with Mike. He's amazing. I really hope you enjoy it. Let's go ahead and celebrate Superman with Mike Carlin.
Now available to own on video cassette.
Well, Mike, first of all, I have to start by saying that you, it's an honor to talk to you, but primarily because you had my dream job, which is basically like overseeing Superman stories for years and years. So,
And most people wished I didn't have the job when I had it. So it's
but you know what?
they all thought they could do better.
We don't care. We don't care about those people. We don't talk about them. We don't even
Well,
acknowledge their
that's
existence.
the past now. So
It's
that's
all in the past. That's
now
right.
there's somebody else doing it, and they're doing a good job actually. The current Superman books are very, very good.
Oh, they're
And
wonderful.
I would not have said that during every era before or after mine. So I think currently they're in good hands.
Because you held that job for a while, this is kind of a ploy. This whole interview is a ploy by me to convince you that I am also a big enough Superman fan that if I ever get the chance to apply for the role somewhere down the line, I can include you as a reference and be like, look, it
Okay,
doesn't get much better than Mike Carlin.
I'll give you a pull quote for your resume.
Perfect. So by the end of this, we'll see if I pass the interview. That way, the interview goes both ways. But what do you remember about, like, as a kid getting into comic books? Like, do you have a particular memory of a comic that was like, this is the one that kicked everything off, or what in particular?
The weirdest thing for me is that my very first memory that I still hold on to was I got my tonsils out and I was in the hospital and they were wheeling me on a gurney to see my mother, who was also in the hospital because she had her tonsils out the same day. And, and then they mixed them up, and there was a whole comedy movie made out of it. But I woke up, and on my lap was
Your tonsils.
so, underneath the comics was my tonsils. So there was all these Superman comics on my lap because my mother loved Superman, so she bought these comics before her operation and made sure that I got them, so that I have something to do. And I was 2, so I was only looking at pictures at that point, so it wasn't like I couldn't tell you what all the stories were, but in my manufactured mind, I like to believe that it was the Superman Annual #1 that was on my lap, and that kind of was cool.
Yeah.
The real reality is that my mother was a Superman fan. She read Superman comics before I was born. She was a Wonder Woman fan. She was not as into Batman, so I didn't get any Batman comics, but I had a TV show coming that would get me into Batman. So there was always comics around, believe it or not. And it's not like she was a collector. She was a reader. She would read them and then give them to somebody else or throw them away or whatever. But she also was a big reader of the EC horror comics, which may explain other things that happened to me in my life. But yeah, she was not the mother who would throw away comics and or rip them up or anything. She would literally give me money for comics.
I was going to say, that's really outside the norm. I feel like so many stories I hear from creators and writers is that story. I had everything. Richard Donner, he was telling me he had Action Comics #1 and his mom threw it away.
See that? I mean, and look what happened. He showed her.
Yeah, whatever happened to that Donner guy?
Well, the thing is, it's just like, my mother was unusual for the time. I believe that now there are a lot of parents who think comics are okay because kids read and blah, 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 and they learn lessons about, doing the right thing and all that stuff. It's not all EC horror comics now, even though you can get some of that stuff too. But it's definitely, that's what's formative for me. So I can't tell you what my first comic was for sure. I can tell you that I remember the day I bought Green Lantern, Green Arrow, when Neil Adams joined that book.
Yeah.
It was the day my grandfather was buried. So I was given money to go and entertain myself so that the old people could cry and I wouldn't have to see it.
What a strange contrast of emotions that day was.
It was
You're running around
weird,
saying, look at this Green Lantern guy, and everyone's like, please, your grandfather.
And then I end up working with Denny O'Neil,
Right.
and honestly, I worked with Neil Adams for a hot second, but it's like getting to meet all those people who created comics that were what I loved when I was a
Mm,
kid. It was pretty cool. I mean, I have to say, I wanted to draw comics first, but I'm not good enough. I went to art high school and I went to an art college, and in the art high school, I got to be an intern at DC Comics. So that was really cool. But it also, as I was Xeroxing Bernie Wrightson pages and Walt Simonson pages and Jack Kirby pages,
mhm,
I saw that I was never going to be able to do this. I could
mm.
never draw with that much consistency, or just that the amount of detail. You have to be able to draw every single thing that there is on Earth. It's a tough job, and I would never have the patience to do that. But I learned enough stuff where I could speak to the artists, and I could articulate where I thought stuff could be helped or moved forward or just done in a better way. And the same with stories, So it was all formative. It was all informative, and it was great to be around this stuff at a really young age. I mean, high school intern. They don't even do that anymore. I don't think
Yeah,
they all
probably not.
college interns mostly, and but the interns get paid now, which they didn't when I was doing it.
It was all about the experience. You had the honor
Experience.
of being in the same room with these people. That's
Well,
what
I
you
was
take away from
I
it.
it was great. I literally sat outside of Julie Schwartz's office, and I could listen to him and Carrie Bates and Elliot Maggin plot stories, and it was just like, this is where it's at.
Yeah,
I can really deal with this.
yeah.
I loved just that chance, and I never took it for granted. I always knew that I had an opportunity that a lot of people were never going to have, and that was important.
I'm guessing that was kind of what got your foot in the door as far as making connections and people that later on, when you were, was it Marvel you went to first? Like that was your first official comic job?
Well, I count the internship as kind of a job, and
Mm,
I also Dick Giordano gave a lecture at my high school, and he gave out packets, and basically the assignment was, here's some pages of a script, draw these pages up, and I'll pick 10 people to come in and get a private lecture from me. And I'm not good enough, but I was good enough to get picked, so I got to go to that. So,
nice.
but I don't expect a guy like Dick Giordano to remember that I was ever anywhere near him in that room, because it was
Right.
just a bunch of high school kids, and it's not his job to remember everybody. He was just doing something solid for the high school. So, yeah, I don't believe I had any amazing connections because of that. It did look better on my resume to say I was an intern at DC. And also, I had Will Eisner and Harvey Kurtzman were my teachers in college. So those names look good on a resume
Oh
too.
yeah. Yeah.
They kind of jump out. And but the reality is, I again, I say I could not draw superhero comics at all. So I said, let me go the funny route,
Mm,
and Mad Magazine is a great place to go, except they have the same 15 artists in every issue. There's not a lot of new guys going in there. And I said, well, look, Marvel has a book called Crazy Magazine, which is basically the same, but they were using new and young people. And I brought my portfolio up there, and Larry Hama, who was the editor, he said I wasn't a great artist, but he liked my jokes.
hey.
So my foot was in the door. And
Yeah.
then about a year later, he goes, "You want to be an assistant editor? There's an opening." And I was like, "Sure. What's that?" I
Right.
don't know what that is, but I'm sure I'm be the best. And then I became an assistant editor, and I worked at Marvel first.
Mm,
So I guess I got paid at Marvel first, but I do count DC as where I first worked. And my mother was not a Marvel fan per se. She definitely was a DC-ite.
mhm. I live
Yeah.
in the world now where I'm like, why can't we just love both? Why do we always have Star Wars, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles? I've gotten
Yeah.
far enough in life where I'm like, I love it all. Let's
I
all be friends together.
Well, and there's sucky stuff coming out of both companies, and
Right.
it's like,
There is an ebb and flow to it.
yeah, the sucky stuff you don't wanna buy. You can't and honestly, if a comic is costing me $5, I really better not hate it because that's not a dime.
That's my hard-earned allowance. Do you know how many times I had to vacuum to earn this $5? Like I am spending my hard-earned money on something solid. So
That's it.
did you what was the first big comic that you started to oversee? Like
Well, I guess, the Fantastic Four was the first, but at that point, a guy named John Byrne was on it, and, saying that you oversee John Byrne means that you are just seeing John Byrne.
literally you were just looking over his shoulder and saying, "That looks good. That looks good."
Well, I mean, there is a point where I think my talent as an editor, and I think the best thing an editor can do is to know when to stay out of it. And honestly, if you have a guy like Byrne or say Chris Claremont on the X-Men, their finger is on a pulse that's not necessarily where my finger would be, and it's like,
Right.
I'm not going to interrupt this. It's working. It's something that's really strong. And honestly, that was something that helped get me to DC because when Byrne went to do Superman, they were looking to change out the editor on the book. His original editor was Andy Helfer, and he
Mhm.
was going to go and launch the new Justice League book that they were planning. So basically, Byrne said, "I can deal with Mike. I like him." And he just got fired from Marvel. So why don't we have him come over? And I was like,
Right.
hey, thanks.
Wait, so what happened with Marvel? Was it something you did, or was it literally just like, "Hey, sorry, gotta
It
go"?
must have been something I said. I don't know. Well, the boss didn't like my work, and he
Mm.
decided that I should go. And
How long had you been there at that point?
I was there about 5 years, if you count the crazy years,
Mm.
and then he got canned the year after he fired me. So it all worked out for everybody.
And then John had left a little bit before you had,
Yeah.
and then he'd gotten the gig with DC kind of revamping, rebooting
Yep.
Superman, and had he
Yes.
already been writing it when he decided to pull you in?
Yeah, he was already my first official issue would be Superman #4. So he did the miniseries, the Man of Steel miniseries, and then he had done 3 issues, kind of with the other editor.
And he was basically like, this other guy, I can't do it. This is not gonna work.
I don't know if there may have been an element of that. I wasn't there for that part,
Right.
but they wanted the editor to focus on launching the new Justice League series, which worked out okay for them too, because that you know doing the Justice League with a sense of humor was exactly the right thing at that time, and it was it was right for him to move over to that stuff.
When you made the move to DC, were you, because I don't know exactly, as much as I would love to be in the world of comics and working in comics, I don't know exactly what it's like to basically, are you paying attention to the competition? Are you looking at what they're putting out? Did you, at that point when you joined DC, were you kind of like, okay, I've done my thing with Marvel. I'm pretty much done with that. I have a good feeling for what I think should be brought to DC, and particularly Superman, this character. Did you go into the role feeling that, or were you just there like, this is really exciting seeing what John's gonna do? I just want to be here to support him.
Back then, the comics companies, the two big companies, had an exchange program. So
Hmm.
everybody at Marvel got a bundle of DC comics every week, and everybody at DC got a bundle of Marvel comics every week. So you were able to keep up on it if you wanted to.
Gotcha.
What I noticed at Marvel was a lot of the editors definitely were acting a little superior, and they would just toss the DC bundle into the garbage. And whether that was the right thing to do or not, I was the guy who also, when I was there, I would look through the books and I would say, "Whoa, who's this Jerry Ordway guy? This
Right.
this guy can really draw." And I got him to come over and ink John Byrne on Fantastic Four, and so I was aware of what was going on at DC. So
Yeah.
I did fit well when I moved over there. So it was helpful to be aware of what was going on. And as I said, I was a DC guy when I was a kid.
Yeah. It wasn't a
And
huge leap.
no, and it really. And then I had kind of a chip on my shoulder. I had to prove that I could do it when my old boss said I couldn't. So
Right.
that was kind of important to me. Now the funny thing is when John Byrne did leave the books, which is when I felt like now I'm really the editor of Superman. Honestly, I think what I put out was the best Marvel comic at that time. I think Superman ended up being, a great Marvel comic. Now
Yeah.
we had other guys in there from Marvel. I got Roger Stern over and Louise Simonson and Jon Bogdanove uh, and Kerry Gamble. These were all Marvel people that came over to DC to work on Superman,
Right.
and I was using DC people too. Dan Jurgens was a DC guy, and
Hmm.
Jerry Ordway, obviously. So it was just like a question of knowing who had the right sensibility for what we were trying to do, and the fact that we were trying to do stories that all kind of linked together was uh, was ridiculous. It was a dumb thing to try. It was really hard,
But
and it was a
this is what I tell people, because when I was telling everyone, like, oh, I'm interviewing Mike Carlin, to basically give them a frame of reference, I was like, Mike Carlin's the original Kevin Feige, but for
Mm.
Superman specifically. And by that I mean Kevin Feige's overseeing, like, all right, all these different films, the Marvel films, they all have to interconnect, and what's the overarching story? But that was you for Superman when it had
Yeah.
4 books and you guys made that decision to do the triangle era, which
Oh, yeah.
connected all these stories.
And it was important when we would have somebody leave the crew and get a new person in there. They really needed to know that it wasn't going to be about them. It was going to be about Superman. We
Yeah.
had the check your ego at the door policy that really it was good and easy to enforce because everybody wanted Superman to be better than Batman.
Yeah.
We are aware that Batman was very, very popular.
And it's, well, especially at this time, it was probably, well, it was 86 when John Byrne started writing Superman. I think Man of Steel was 86,
Yeah, it was 86 and
and then 89 was the Batman movie, the Tim Burton Batman.
right, but 85 or 86 is when Frank Miller came over to do The Dark Knight, and
Right. Yes.
so that was what we were competing with,
Mm,
and that's a good healthy competition right there, so that was good, and we just felt that it was a wrong world if Superman wasn't popular,
yeah.
and ultimately, Marvel and X-Men obviously was popular. Characters like the Punisher and Wolverine and all the Image books. That this stuff was really popular, and it was like it really was bothering us because Superman was considered a Boy Scout and corny,
Yeah.
and it's like we didn't think that Superman was that. And I've heard a lot of people say that Superman is a hard character to write,
Yeah.
and he's a tough guy to care about, and because he can do anything and nothing can kill him. And I was like, yeah, well, there are things that bother him, and we can really torture him.
Well, I mean, I always thought that was so silly. I was like, if you've got a writer who's coming in and saying that right off the bat, like, Superman is boring, you can't. I'm like, well, then you're not the guy to do this, because there are
Right.
stories to tell. They've been told, and they're some of the best comic books, some of the best storytelling you will ever see. It's
It's
just a
true.
matter of, like, being able to see the value of that and being passionate about the material.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, one of my frustrations was in dealing with, we would give notes on movies and TV shows and things like that when we were working on these characters, like the ill-fated Superboy TV show happened during all
Right.
this. But I got to write a bunch of the episodes, so that was
How
fun.
cool is that? How
It
fun.
was great, but we'd be in the room with producers like people like Ilya Salkind and and then later on, when Nicolas Cage was going to be Superman and all this,
Right.
and we got the chance to give notes, and it almost without fail, the first idea that a creator would come up with involved taking away Superman's powers.
Mm.
And I was like, that you can do that story. You can get to that on your sixth movie,
Yes. Yeah.
but you, how about doing a Superman story first,
Yeah.
and not making it about, okay, let's if we put Superman in the bottle city of Kandor, he won't have his powers. And I'm like, yeah, then he's just one of the gang. It's like that. It doesn't make any sense to me.
It's not Superman.
Right. It's like it's any other heroic character. He might as well be a fireman or a policeman.
Absolutely. And honestly, any comic book character technically is invincible. Batman is always going to figure his way out of a situation.
Right. The
You know,
star of the show is always going to be invincible.
exactly. So it's like, let's put that invincible conversation aside for
Right.
let's do this. You pair down, and this is kind of what I think the philosophy was, what John's philosophy was, what your team's philosophy was
Mhm.
let's pare down the powers a little bit. Let's make them a little bit
Yep.
more vulnerable, a little bit more susceptible to some of the stuff that he was more indestructible against
Right.
before. And let's give him that roster. Let's revamp the roster of villains to make them more of a threat. And that's the right approach. It's not like
Mhm.
let's dramatically change anything recognizable about this character. It's, well, let's just tweak it a little bit because
Right.
the elements work for the reason this guy's been around for 50 years at that point, now
Yep.
for 80, 90 years.
Right.
It's like there's a reason for that. It's not just a coincidence.
No, and the idea for us was not necessarily to throw things away. It was to just get to them and maybe let readers be in on the ground floor, because by the time something's 50 years old and comics back issues cost some money even back then, it's like and people used to write stories and put footnotes into comics that people would never be able to find because they were so
Right.
40-year-old stories and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, you have a library at your fingertips at DC. The regular customer that can't see that first Mr. Mxyzptlk story,
Right.
and it's
Right.
like, but
Exactly.
he can see the first Mxyzptlk story if we start it over.
And I think that's something people don't realize too, is that Marvel had only been around for 20, like as far as like
Yeah,
the big Marvel,
25
the
years.
spy. Yeah. So Superman had been around for 50 years at that point.
Yeah,
Batman, these characters had been around the block a few times. So it makes perfect sense to say, like, you know what, we're fighting a losing battle against Marvel because Marvel has recruited a whole bunch of new readers and we're relying on 50-year-old mythology
right.
that people have grown out of.
Right, and those stories were not written to be continuity. There was no
Yeah,
such thing as continuity when they started writing those comics. It's the fans who put continuity onto the comics. People like Roy Thomas coming along and saying this all should match, and it's like it's a necessary evil to a degree. I mean,
mm,
and like I said, connecting the Superman books, it it was a dumb idea because it was really hard, but it was also worth it.
yeah. When it started off, it was the three books, right? It was Superman, Action Comics, and Adventures of Superman.
When we started it, it was really only Superman and Adventures, because
Mm,
Action Comics kind of got shanghaied into a weekly comic, which it was like an anthology for a little while,
got it. Okay.
and it was only a 2-page Superman sequence. It was like kind of we did it was a Sunday page
Right.
basically,
Right. And
and
so there
but it
was
was
no interconnected story. It was these kind of all stood alone.
yeah, and when Byrne left, he was writing two of the books, and there was the third book was action. He was writing adventures, even though Jerry Ordway was drawing it. So there was just a built-in continuity because it was one person's
Right.
storyline. Uh, And at first we just wanted to make sure that, if one story ended and Jimmy Olsen was wearing a gray sweater, he'd start the next story taking off the gray sweater or
Right.
whatever. And it's like it was supposed to be like nothing stuff, but then we just got excited about doing the larger stories in a really, you know, accelerated pace. The stories happen fast. The whole death and return of Superman is about a year's worth of comics, but it happened fast. And one of the great things, timing is everything. Because for me, it's like, thank God there was no internet during all that, because we actually managed to keep some secrets, and things were not blown, and the fans didn't find out about stuff before we wanted them to. And it was
Mhm.
just like there were surprises. And it's harder to do that nowadays.
Well, and also there's a constant flow of feedback too, and a constant chance for somebody to come in and say, excuse me, Mike, I noticed on Twitter this guy said this. Can we think
Yeah.
about maybe, and you don't have that oversight as much. It really is about like, what do we have to offer? And you're hearing from the fans occasionally, but not to the extent you hear from them now.
Well, what we had, and what people, they always say they miss the letters pages, and it's like we had the letters. I read every letter, and there were times where I would say, "Oh man, I think we went the wrong way here,"
Mhm.
because this, out of 15 letters, 10 people say this was a mistake.
Do
You
you
know,
remember do you remember a storyline in particular that you were like, "Oh yeah, let's steer clear of that moving forward?"
Yes, but I'm not going to tell you which one it is. Because actual people worked on it, and I don't want to make them feel
Don't
bad.
want to hurt their feelings.
But what I can tell you is that I got a letter from a reader, and he said, part of what we were trying to do was get the barnacles off the ship, and that included saying that Superman was the sole survivor of Krypton. That's why
Mm,
our version of Supergirl was not from Krypton.
right.
And again, maybe we would get to that kind of stuff as time went on, but it was also like the Phantom Zone was not only about Kryptonian prisoners. It was a place where people from anywhere could have gotten to. It was
Mhm.
kind of just like the Cloud. uh, but we just wanted to get to these things and let people in on the ground floor of stuff, for the first time. But a reader sent in. We had established kryptonite. We had green kryptonite. We didn't have any of the other colors
Right. It
at
was
that
it was
point.
basically the full spectrum of colors prior to
Right, and it was kind of normal when I was a kid, but it's when you think about it, it was kind of arbitrary and kind of a corny idea.
Yeah, it just generates story ideas, but like superficial it was like, "Oh, this one makes Superman act silly and this one
But
makes him do this."
a reader sent in the idea that if red kryptonite was created by Mr. Mixes-Pitalik, it would be cool. And I was like, yes, it would.
Yeah.
And we got that idea, and we actually paid the guy by giving him a page of Kurt Swan inked by John Byrne.
Oh, how cool.
And it was just like, DC bought that page from the artists, and we gave it to the guy as payment for the idea that came in a letter. And it's like, nowadays everything this it just was like, we've always been a business where the fans can get to the talent really easily. And
Mhm.
now obviously with the internet it's even easier, but back then there was at least conventions and stuff. And like I said, we would all read the letters. We wanted to see what was working and what wasn't working. We wanted
Mhm.
praise for sure. And the other thing that was that people forget about letter columns is that they're sales tools. They were
Yeah.
not the world's opinions. It was just like I would put in negative letters on a page just because that seemed like the right thing to do,
Right.
but I didn't have to. And I would be much happier to just print all the good stuff, and that would make the writers and artists happy too.
Right.
But now with the internet, everybody can say whatever they want and hurt people's feelings all over the place,
Yeah.
and target things. I mean, you were talking about the tomatometer, and and how the Marvel movies would hit a certain level or whatever. There's also, people they can overload the system with negative stuff too if
Yeah.
they choose to. The toxic fandom can do damage.
Yeah.
Uh,
There's a mentality, I think. And I hope it's something that it feels like it's evolved a little bit, but it certainly still exists. But that portion of the fandom that forgets there are human beings making these things.
well, that's the other thing. It's like
Yeah.
you do feelings can be hurt, and I know you don't care because you don't know who James Gunn is, but when
Right.
that movie comes out, I'm afraid there's going to be, just automatic backlash. Whereas it should be, if you don't like it, don't see it. If you don't like the concept of it, don't go.
Yeah.
That's the
Certainly.
way you vote. That's how you do things. That's how you do damage because the company will listen. Before we got on the air here, we were talking about how, there was always a lot more Batman stuff coming out. Our DC animated movies is they do, Batman and Justice League, and that had Batman in it. But Superman's, they would come out and the readers wouldn't buy that. They would
Yeah.
buy the Batman ones.
I have a theory behind this. I want to see how valid this is. Let me check it with you because you're the best person to gauge whether I'm on to anything. But I really, really, truly believe we've had movies of varying levels of quality, but there's only been one great Superman movie, and that's the 78 Richard Donner
Yeah.
film. When Donner was fired from 2 and Lester took over, Superman 2 was fine.
Yeah.
It
Parts
had
of
its
it.
moments.
Yeah.
And a lot of those moments came from Donner and Tom Mankiewicz.
Yeah.
And then after that, 3 and 4 really killed Superman in people's eyes. And then at that point, as Superman is crashing and burning, you have
Yeah.
Batman on the rise.
Yeah, but the same thing happened to the Batman movies. The same exact thing.
It's true. Yeah.
There was 4 of both of them, and they got progressively worse.
Yes, that's true. And then moving into the turn of the century, we had Batman Begins and Nolan kind
Mhm.
of, I think
Yeah.
that really, what people talk about is like, people love Batman. They love superheroes dark. And I'm like, well, yeah, but the reason we love the Nolan Batman films is not just because they're dark. It's because they're great movies. Like it's great
Yeah,
cinema.
that's the thing, because Batman Forever was supposedly dark, but it was bad, you know?
I have a soft spot in my heart for Batman Forever. It's not a good movie, but I love that one, and I don't like Batman and Robin, but Batman.
I'm with you, and honestly, right, just from talking about this right now, they made the big mistake. The 4th movie should have been Batman Forever,
Yeah.
and they just totally blew it. They could have called the 3rd one Batman and Robin.
Got more
Robin was
money.
in it.
Yeah.
It was just like they totally messed up, and that was symbolic of what was going wrong with those movies.
Nobody was paying attention to what
No,
people
no.
wanted at that point.
Well, the other thing, consumers or readers or watchers or whatever you want to call somebody who's paying their money to see these things and these stories is, when I was a kid, it never occurred to me that the comic I read and didn't like could have been different. That was just the way that comic was supposed to be.
Yeah.
I knew people did them. I knew writers and artists were involved, but it never occurred to me that if somebody would have just said, let's go left instead of right, it would be a different comic book, until I started doing this for a living. And that's
Mm.
when, I didn't sit there thinking that my idea would be better and, or whatever. It's just like, I think you got to just like let a project be a project. And again, you get to vote by not supporting it.
Yeah.
The other thing you need to remember is that when they do Batman, the movie, they don't know that there's going to be another Batman movie. So they have to put in all the stuff that they want to put in and maybe overload it. Maybe, that's why every movie has 2 villains in it or whatever,
Right.
because you don't know if you're going to get a chance to do another one. And obviously both Superman and Batman, the first shots at franchising them, they did go away.
Yeah.
Now it's actually different. Now you can have 15 Spider-Man movies and they are all different continuities.
It's true. And I think the difference is, like we're saying, this dip in quality is partly because the filmmakers involved, the producers and the studio involved, did not have the respect and love for the material, and that's what caused them to burn out.
Or the people doing it just have an idea that doesn't work.
Yeah.
It sometimes is just that, and nobody tries to put out a shitty movie or
Right.
a bad comic book. Everybody wants to do something that they think is a good idea. It just doesn't always work out. I mean, for my money right now, the multiverse is a great idea. DC did it in the comics first,
Mm.
but Marvel got it in the movies first, and well, we did some stories here and there. Star Trek did, the evil universe, and it was just like it was a standard thing. But it's too much,
Yeah.
and I think that John Q. Public doesn't want to waste the energy to figure out how does this work? How does this Flash? Why does that have to do with Nick Cage being Superman for 3 seconds? It
Right.
doesn't matter. And then
It's true.
or an Ant-Man movie where there's 5,000 Ant-Men, and
Mm.
it's like, all right, I guess that is like an anthill or whatever, but it just doesn't. I don't care about any of this after a while.
I think what we're seeing is kind of what happened to Superman pre reboot in '86, which is that the narrative and the universe has gotten so convoluted that people, general audiences, want to be able to start fresh and understand the story. And they're like, "What do you mean? I have to watch 5 movies, watch 3 Disney Plus series, and then I have to
Yeah,
read a book, and then I have to listen to this and what?"
it's become its own problem. Again, it's like the multiverse is not a bad idea.
Mm,
It just and when DC wiped out the whole multiverse with the Crisis, their thinking was that a new reader would not have a who's who next to them to tell them what a golden age Superman is compared to a regular Superman,
mm,
and it's like they don't and they won't bother, and maybe they were right at that time, but at the same time, since then there's been shows like Quantum Leap and other things, and all kinds of there's TV shows that show multiple universes and all this stuff, so the regular person started getting into the concept and had it, and now they're just doing it too often and too
yeah.
much, and it's not fun anymore because it's just routine.
The novelty wears off.
That's exactly what it is, and that people talk about superhero fatigue, and I think it's multiverse fatigue.
Yeah, I think it's a storyline that's kind of it's when you love a TV show and the TV show reaches a natural organic ending, but then you have 5 or 6 more seasons
Yeah,
afterwards
well,
and
the
you're
jump
like,
jump the shark concept.
right, exactly. So I think we've reached that point in the MCU where they're struggling to figure out like
There's
what.
nothing wrong with saying, "Oh my god, you got 3 different actors playing Spider-Man in the same shot."
Yeah,
That's fun, but that's not a story.
it's not a story, but and also when you start to do it 10 or 12 times in 10 or
Yeah,
12 movies, then it's like, okay, I liked it the first time, but now
and at the same time, the Spider-Verse movies are phenomenal.
yes.
They're
Yeah.
great.
But those are like, to your point, it's not about the multiverse is like the icing on the cake, but the cake
Right.
is substantial. There's a story and there's
Mhm.
character stuff happening that's involving and engaging. And that's why those movies are great.
And so far, there's only been 2, and if that was the only place they were doing this stuff and not in Doctor Strange movies as well, then it would be, you know, that would be that animated universe's cool thing,
Yeah.
and they did a good job on it, and that was a creatively successful attempt at an idea. And again, I say it's only just the idea that comes out bad if it
You're right.
doesn't work.
Right.
But
Well,
having the idea is fine.
well, I think that was what was so brilliant about your guys' Superman run is that you were, as far as taking a page from Marvel, what you did was you humanized Superman in a way that really had not been done. Even as much as I love the Donner film, Superman is still relatively like he's the stand-up Boy Scout hero, infallible hero.
Yeah, but you have Jimmy Olsen and Perry White and Lois Lane who he cares about in the story as well, and
Yeah.
they do things in the story.
Yes, and
You
they have there's romance and there's humanity and emotion in that stuff. But what you guys really did is you hammered home, like you were like, let's ground it in those relationships. Let's humanize every single one of them. And you guys are really responsible for building out that ensemble and bringing in new characters.
Because we wanted you to care. Superman cared about the people of Metropolis, and we needed the readers to care about them. And that just meant that we had to spend time with those characters. And maybe because we had 4 issues a month, we had the room to do that, or we took the room to do that. But because if I had a criticism of what's going on in comics now, it's not just Marvel or DC or not just the Superman books, but there's nothing at stake for a superhuman character, really. And like you say, the star of the comic is always going to win in the long run. But it's like, I think by having Ron Troop and Cat Grant and all these other characters on the side, affected by the big fight that's going on in Metropolis or whatever, is really an important thing. And then you have the Justice League comic or the Avengers comic, that's like where the policemen and firemen go out for a drink and they talk about, oh my God, I just fought this guy from another planet.
Right.
And, my wife doesn't understand. And, it's like, but that's that book's job. The rest of it should be, oh my God, Superman is he's gonna take a beating just so that this building doesn't fall on Jimmy Olsen.
Yeah.
And it's like, I care about Jimmy Olsen. I care about Ron Troop. I care about these other characters. I care that Alice, the copy girl, has no home and she lives in at the office, literally.
Right.
It's
right.
like it was a one-time story, but I think it's one of the better stories that we ever did.
Yeah, I love that one.
It was just great. And we took the time to do this stuff. And I think that a lot of superhero comics now, they're worrying about who the super bad guy is and who the superhero is. And it's just not, it's not a story that regular people can identify with as easily.
What was the reaction back then to like that first stretch when John Byrne took over? From my understanding, it was, look, this might ruin your day, but I was born in 1986. So sadly, I didn't get to witness all of this firsthand, but I like to say, I feel a kinship to this particular era because we were both born in the same year.
Well,
so
luckily for you, they're putting out the Triangle era omnibuses now. So
it is on, it's not on this shelf, but it is on a shelf in this house.
Well, I mean, I love that they're collecting that stuff. I mean, I don't get anything out of it. I don't get a penny, but I definitely get the satisfaction of knowing that 30 years later, somebody who hasn't read this stuff is going to get a chance to see it.
And not just that, but I mean, like, I also have a DC Infinite subscription. These things are available digitally as well.
From what I understand, I mean, I think I have a subscription to that, but I don't know if I do. You got to kind of know where to look. Do they list the Triangle books?
They do now. What they've done that's made it much easier, because I had to kind of follow a list and say, all right. And literally what's funny is at the end of every comic, you guys would say, all right, tune into action number this to find out, so I can find the number, but they actually went a step further and they've made collections. So you can say, here's the Triangle era volume 1, and you can go in and they've put it all in order, which I think that's a newer thing that they just did.
Good.
Maybe.
Yeah. Cause that was the criticism I had when I first went in there. I was just like, I wouldn't bother to try to figure it out. And it's part of why I came up with the triangles in the first place. It was like, I needed it for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you asked about, that when did we first realize, I mean, right from the start, Byrne, what would happen is he'd draw a scene at the Daily Planet and he would draw the same people in the office all the time. Mm-hmm. And it would be, even if they weren't in the story, you'd see a bald guy with his glasses on top of his head. And that would be a guy we ended up naming Wit later. Named after Whitney Ellsworth, who was a Superman editor back in the 40s and 50s.
Right.
But anyway, and he never talked. That was our gimmick too. He didn't talk when Byrne did it. We kept him not talking. But it's like we put that stuff in, and then people feel like this is a place, Whereas if you look at the Daily Bugle or even the Daily Planet for in a lot of stories, there's generic people always walking around, and it's not people that you can just see every issue and say, "Oh, that guy still works there. That's great." It's like again, it's a real thing. It's a reality thing.
If we're putting it in sitcom terms, you wanted a Cheers approach. You wanted everyone who walked into the planet to be a recognizable character that you were like, hey, that's Woody Harrelson. I like him. I'm so glad he's in this episode.
And then, Jeanette Kahn, who was the president of DC at the time, she was really approving of what we were doing. She liked what we were doing. She could see that it was different. So when Byrne left, and Jerry Ordway and Roger Stern first, and then Dan Jurgens joined, and then Louise Simonson and Bogdanove. And it's like she could tell that we were all unified, and she would read every issue as a fan almost. But she also was the person who was going to Hollywood and selling our ideas and hopefully getting a TV show. Now, back then, there was not a lot of TV shows, not a lot of movies.
Yeah.
If you got something sold, it was a miracle. And Lois and Clark, the TV show, directly came from the way we were handling the comics.
Oh yeah. I was born in 1986. Like I said, I grew up with Christopher Reeve was my original Superman, but my first live, I can watch this is a new thing, was Lois and Clark.
And for better or for worse, if you like it, great. If you don't like it, that's okay. It's there for your cousin. It's just like it, but they got the idea of the Daily Planet. Jeanette and I put together a Bible to sell the show, and we called it Lois Lane's Planet. That was the original thing that we pitched, because we also knew that special effects for a super character were costly, and that would be a tougher sell. So it was going to be mostly focused on the people of the Daily Planet, who would include Clark Kent, and then somebody would say, oh my God, Superman just saved us from a meteor, and everyone would go, woo, look out the window. We were thinking too small, but we also knew that the effects would be cheesy if they tried too much. And we were right about that.
Yeah.
But it was all, again, it was about Cat Grant, and it was about Lex Luthor, and it was about all the people who lived in Metropolis. And that was smart, and that was a good thing to do, just because it's not what people thought superhero comics should be, and that's why Stan Lee's comics in the 60s were smart for their time, because he was the one who put in the real world problems, and Spider-Man would get a cold, and it's like, that's a mask you don't want to be sneezing in, I'll tell you that, right? So it's like he puts those little touches that made it different than Superman and Batman. And I think that was important then. And then we did the same thing later. So I do, like I said, I do think we were doing the best Marvel comic at that time.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think it's funny having grown up knowing about Lois and Clark before I started reading the comics regularly. When I went back to discover the Triangle era, realizing this all of the stuff that I've seen, whether it's in the animated show they did, Bruce Timm did, and all of this stuff comes from this. This is stuff that literally changed the game and is now part of the mythology.
Right, but that without being too critical, that's to me what was wrong with the Zack Snyder movies. It stopped being about the world, and it was only about the superheroes.
I'm with you. It wasn't about, it wasn't even really about the superheroes, because I watched that movie and I'm not thinking oh, that's Superman. I'm like, that's a guy who's wearing Superman's outfit. He looks like Superman, but he's
that guy's
much angrier than Superman.
That guy's stepfather didn't start him out the right way.
It's true. His stepfather was like, hey, maybe you should have let those kids drown on the school
bus.
Let
them die. Kill them all.
Well, what's funny about it is I think a lot of fans of Zack Snyder's take, I think they look at the Superman in Exile storyline. So people don't know this, but the whole thing, Superman does not kill. That's kind of hammered home. And in your story, John Byrne, his last issue was Superman, these villainous Kryptonians. Superman finally has to say, you know what? The only thing I can do with you guys is use kryptonite to execute you.
Yeah.
And it's a big moment in the story, and it's treated as a big moment in the story to the point where it kicks off this long-running story arc of Superman basically leaving Earth and putting himself in exile for this thing.
Well, I'm never going to know what John Byrne's follow-up stories were going to be like because
Yeah.
he chose to leave on that big moment. But it was really important to Ordway and Stern and me that it not just be a throwaway moment, because a lot of people were critical of that story at the time, because it's like having a code against killing is one thing, but showing why they have a code against killing became the story to us. At the same time, yes, I know I have never killed anybody, so I guess I have a code against killing.
Well, nobody
too.
we know about. Let's be real
Well,
here.
this is public, right?
Yeah.
So it's like I get why people were criticizing, but at the same time, I don't have a problem with Superman going that way because of the business he's in. He's going. That's what Doomsday ended up being.
Yeah.
He had to do something drastic, and that was the business he's in. But the thing that we did right was that we spent a year afterwards showing you how screwed up Superman felt about killing anybody.
Yeah.
And it was like, again, that's where having the luxury of the space to do that was really important to us.
I think the difference is maybe in the film, it felt a little bit more like a shock gimmick. And in the comics, it felt like maybe John Byrne wanted to leave you like, hey, good luck, guys. He throws this wrench into the mix and leaves.
It definitely could have been the case.
But I think what is clear in retrospect, and certainly that story, the Superman in Exile story, is one of the most beloved story arcs in Superman history. I love it. It's one of my favorites. But I think it's because you guys dealt with the ramifications. You looked at it and said, like, well, it's not going to be a gimmick. Let's actually examine how this would affect this character. And
right. And again, it was new territory because up until then, Superman hadn't killed anybody.
yeah.
So it's like, this is the story, and we're going to get the chance to do something that hasn't been done before. And that felt good,
Yeah.
and it paid off. It worked.
Absolutely.
And again, you can't, not everything we did worked, so it's like you got to kind of look at this stuff 30 years later and say, well, whew, we got out of that one alive.
Right. So my understanding of going through this and then getting into the seminal Death of Superman storyline was basically, it had been a running gag with the group. Like whenever it was like, all right, let's come up with some ideas. You guys used to do a Superman kind of retreat, a summit every
we had
year.
a super summit every year.
And you would block out all the stories, and every year somebody would say, well, we could kill him. We could kill him.
If we got stuck, that would be the joke.
And then one year it turned into like, well, maybe.
Well, because Jeanette and myself, we knew that there was a Lois and Clark show looming, and we had planned a story where Lois and Clark were going to get married. Also, new territory, and not an imaginary story. It wasn't a hoax either. We basically, Jeanette and I, everybody thinks that Hollywood stepped in and said, you better not have them get married because we have this show coming. And
right.
No, we said, let's hold off. If the show's a hit, we can get to the wedding on the show and in the comics at the same time. So we're just postponing this story. And if the show's a stinker and it gets canceled in 3 weeks, we can get back to the wedding right away, so that no big deal. We're just putting a story in between.
No big deal. Just a little tiny story.
Well, you know what? It became a bigger story because all the writers and artists were mad. They were mad that we took away a story they wanted to do. They honestly thought, well, what happens if the show is on for 4 or 5 years and I'm not a part of the team anymore? I don't get to do this story that I was involved in.
That's a fair point.
And it's like they were just pissed off. And I think they were right to be, and I don't blame them. And that's why Let's Just Kill Him stuck that time. And it was just like it basically I was like, okay, yeah, I know you're all mad. If we kill him, what happens next?
And then everybody's like, well, okay, now we're talking.
They said funeral for a friend, you dummy. Don't you know the triangle numbers? So basically the funeral for a friend became why we did the death of Superman. Because really, the death of Superman is not a story. It's the start of a story.
Yeah.
And the funeral for a friend is the second act. And then the reign of the Superman, which was also not our plan originally, was the third act. And it was just like when we saw how much the death of Superman was selling and how much interest there was in the funeral.
Yeah, because it blew up, right? It was something nobody anticipated as far as the mainstream reaction.
We had no idea what was happening. And we couldn't have stopped it if we wanted to. I mean, it was like people started writing about it from the solicitations for the comic shops. And that was like 2 months, 3 months earlier than the comic was coming out. And we were really afraid that everyone would be all hyped up and go to the comic stores and say, give me the death of Superman. And everybody would be like, it's not out yet. We don't have it. And it's like, we were petrified that by the time they got to it, they'll say, oh, that's old news already. We don't care about that. That happened 3 months ago, and that was a mistake. Then the stores ordered so many copies, we were deathly afraid that they were going to get stuck with them. And that, that was a non-returnable kind of a thing. And then the stores would be mad,
right.
And that would be bad for DC. So it just was like, oh my God, we're getting killed on every angle on this thing, except we weren't. It all worked out okay, but we didn't know. It was uncharted territory. And then, and don't let anyone else tell you this otherwise. It's like you can't manufacture that kind of success. Everybody says, "Oh, that was just a big hype story. That they just did that to sell comics." I said, "Well, first of all, yes."
Yeah, you're not wrong.
And second of all, that doesn't mean it's going to sell. It's like that's the reality is that we don't know what this is going to be. Anytime we tried, when we did Marvel versus DC, we wanted that to be big. We wanted that to help the comic book business, across the board. And we did press conferences. We did all kinds of things. It did not match what the Death of Superman did. Death of Superman just hit the world at the right time, with the right story that day. And we had the right people doing it. And it worked. It was just worked out, so, and then basically if we did anything, we didn't drop the ball.
Yeah.
Because when the sales got so big on the Death of Superman, that's when marketing guys actually came along and said, hey, because of the way solicitations work, we don't want to say Superman's coming back to life before he's even dead.
Right.
So we're going to cancel the books for a little while.
That was so smart.
I said, great. That was not our idea. That was marketing, purely marketing. And I was like, oh, good. I can have a couple of months off and get caught up on things. But that's when Paul Levitz, the guy who wanted me to make more Superman comics, said, oh, no, you still got to do miniseries and News Time magazine and all kinds of things. So I still had a lot of work to do. But anyway, then we started getting nervous that if Superman just sat up in his coffin and said, that was some kind of rest I just had,
right.
The world would have killed us. So we had to come up with something big. And each book had its own writer and artist. And we came up with the idea of let's do something drastic and have Superman come back different. And they all wanted to do something different from each other. They were not going to be collaborating, or they would rather not, because then you have to pick somebody's version of a new version of Superman.
Right.
And Louise Simonson said, why don't we do them all? And that's when the reign of the Superman happened. And we had an emergency meeting. We had an extra fast meeting where we got everybody in and we came up with the reign of the Superman stuff. at that meeting. And when I went to my hotel room that night, I turned on the news and they were reporting that we were having a meeting. And that was bizarre.
What were they saying about the meeting?
They said, well, DC got the message that everybody was mad that they killed Superman. So they had a special meeting to plan his return.
Nobody appreciates him when he's around, but suddenly everybody cares now that he's gone.
It was, I just wish that people would believe the truth when they hear the truth, but they don't.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we did this. And it's also, again, it was all story driven. That's why it works.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not a gimmick. It can be looked back on as a gimmick if you want, just because it hadn't been done.
But that's what I was going to say is, once again, you guys proved, similarly to the Superman in Exile storyline, where it's like, yes, Superman killing could have been a gimmick, but then you found a really organic and meaningful way to tell a story. And it was the same thing with the death of Superman. It could have been in lesser hands or a team that was just not up to the task. It could have been what you described of Superman waking up the next day and being like, oh, well, that was a weird dream.
Yeah, well, that's the reality is we weren't the first people who did a Death of Superman story. The guy who created Superman did a Death of Superman story in the early 60s, and it was started and finished in one comic book.
Right.
And it's just like, this is too big a story for one comic book. And I guess they didn't do as many serialized things then, but that's where Marvel Comics helped. Because when Marvel Comics started doing their stories that continued one issue to the next, sometimes crossing over, so that Iron Man and Daredevil, I buy Daredevil, but I don't buy Iron Man, but I have to buy this issue because it's got the Daredevil story in it.
Right.
And it's like, and I hate having this one Iron Man comic in my collection in the middle of my Daredevil comics.
Right.
But I did it, and it's like, that taught me something.
Yes.
Like, if the fanatics are going to be fanatical, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it right.
Yeah. Do you remember any interactions in that period of time with fans who maybe were like, I can't believe
Oh
you
my
killed
God.
them. I can't believe, how dare you?
Well, wait till you hear this one. There was one comic store guy, a very prominent guy, who called me up mad, and he was yelling,
Wow.
You can't take Superman away. He's the American people's property. You can't do this. And I said, well, I technically
can't.
Not. And we can do this. And I promise you, just wait and see. I'm not putting myself out of work.
Right. Like, come on, like, let's I'm not saying he's coming back, but let's just take a breather.
That's the way I feel about all these haters of movies that they haven't seen. It's like, I'm convinced that they created the internet just so people could complain about Michael Keaton being cast as Batman.
Right.
And there's nothing had happened yet. No, nothing was shot. Michael Keaton was talked about. The world went crazy mad. And just like, why can't you just wait till you see it? And now he's considered the best Batman there ever was.
Oh, remember, it was the same thing when they cast Heath Ledger as the Joker too. Just the outcry was probably not as big as the Michael Keaton thing, but I remember after seeing Batman Begins and hearing people complaining about Heath Ledger, I was like, guys, this guy made Batman Begins. I think we can trust him. I think we're okay.
Well,
I think it's going to be okay.
It's like James Gunn, he made some crappy characters into characters that I give a shit about. One of them is just a tree, and another one is a raccoon with a ray gun. But it's like, let's wait and see. It may still be all bad, but it might not be, because he knows how to tell a story.
He is a great storyteller, and he is clearly in love with the material.
Well, he's a deep diver, that's for sure, and I appreciate that. The first speech he gave after getting this job, I mean, I don't know him. I haven't met him. I will say that they invited a bunch of the creators to the set.
Yeah, I remember seeing the photo.
And Well, I should have been in that photo.
You should have been in that photo.
I was invited. It was my fault that I couldn't be there. I had some medical stuff going on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it sucks, but at least I was invited, and I felt thrilled. But I would have liked to have talked to James Gunn because I do have a real belief in what he can do, and he knows our stuff. The first speech he did, he said the word Elseworlds, and I was like, "Do you know how long I've been fighting with them to keep that Elseworld comic concept out there?" I mean, I admit we maybe did too many of them, and it kind of watered it down, like the multiverse does.
Sure.
But it's like he said Elseworlds, and now they're doing Elseworlds again in the comics. And I'm like, I tried to get them to put some kind of a label on our animated movies like Red Sun and Gotham by Gaslight and Gods and Monsters. These are not part of the regular continuity. They're
Right.
different. And it's okay for them to be different. Just tell the consumer that this is different. And they may want to buy it because of that. They may not want to buy it because of that. But the reality is you got to inform people.
Yes.
And I was like, this is a term that we made up and a DC owns it. Let's own it. Let's do stuff with this.
I think what's encouraging about what we're seeing with James Gunn right now is a sense of, I mean, he grew up reading the comics. He's not like a random filmmaker they brought in to shake things up. He's a fan first who also happens to be a great filmmaker who now is like been given the keys to the entire kingdom.
Mhm.
And I just get a sense from him of love and respect. And I think for Superman in particular, to hear the stuff he said about Superman and to see the footage that they've released, to me, as somebody who has adored this character for so long and felt like he's been misunderstood for so long, I'm like ready for this.
He is a genius. He showed the dog. He put the dog
Yes.
right there in the front of the story. And I don't know how Crypto fits in, but the fact that he's there, again, it's something new. You haven't seen that yet in the movies.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look like he talks like the raccoon does. So
Right.
you may have gotten this right. So that part is I am very trusting. I could be being duped, but I don't think I am being duped. I think he's got something. And well, the thing is, just because something matches the comics doesn't mean it's going to be a good movie either.
Yeah.
We put out our share of crummy comics in the course of our lifetimes, and it's just like it just because it was in a comic doesn't mean it was right. It just means that that's what was in the comic.
Yeah.
So,
and again, this is all speculation on my part. I'm hoping for the best, and I have faith.
well,
I have faith in.
it's all speculation on the haters' part too, and that's the problem. It's like just keep it to yourself until you see it, then you can criticize it all you like.
Look, with all due respect to Mr. Snyder and the team of filmmakers involved with his particular vision of this world, if I had to sit through 10 years of that as a Superman fan, we can deal with a Superman that actually looks and acts and behaves like Superman.
And I feel bad. I think Henry Cavill was a fine choice for Superman. I think
Agreed.
He would have done a great job if he was in a Superman movie.
I completely agree. But you know what? To me, I'm just kind of like, if people are complaining about what Superman is in this new film, I'm kind of just like, maybe you guys just don't like Superman, because I look at that and I'm somebody who loves this character, has grown up loving your work and so much of the work that has gone into making him who he is, that I look at this and I'm like, this looks amazing. And if I'm satisfied, then that's all anybody needs to know.
Well, I look at all the stuff that's been put out there so far, the leaked photos, the trailers, and I just say, I think we're heading in the right direction. And I cross my fingers that there's a story that goes with it.
I can only hope for the best. Look, I want this movie to make so much money because I want to be able to go see more of them.
Right. Well, that's the other thing is that, like always, we don't know if there's going to be a second one.
We really don't.
We don't know if this thing bombs. There may be no more James Gunn movies too.
Exactly. This is a lot's riding on this movie's shoulders, and I just feel like right now the vibe of the country, the world is like, we need Superman.
Yeah, I believe me, I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questionable things going on in the world.
It is a good time for a great filmmaker to remind the world why we need Superman. So
Yep.
I think James is the right guy for the job. I'm excited for it, and I am ready to see a Superman movie that makes me feel things again.
I hope he enjoys this episode of your podcast because he'll see that he's got a couple of guys on his side.
Oh yeah,
And
we're out there, both of us, and I guarantee you, the people are on the internet who are shouting just have nothing better to do. The rest of us are out there buying Superman comics and doing productive things with our lives.
well, they were shouting before there was a James Gunn Superman.
They were shouting at you on the phone for killing
Oh,
Superman.
I didn't get to tell you who called and complained besides the comic store guy.
Somebody else did.
Oh my God. One night I'm sitting at home watching TV and the phone rings at home, not at work. And a guy starts yelling at me and I'm like, who is this? What is going on with Mike? This is Harlan Ellison. And I don't really think it's a good idea what you're doing with Superman. And you really shouldn't be doing this. Now, Harlan was a known comic book fan.
Yeah.
And I don't know how he got my home phone number, but I think I have my suspicions on who gave it to him. But he called and he did a half-hour riff on what an idiot I was and how stupid this was going to be and what a big mistake it was. And by the end of the phone call, I had convinced him that this was going to open more story doors than it closed. And I convinced him, and he knows story, and he knows that's what you need to do is build more stories. He got off the phone and said, "Good luck, you got me."
Amazing.
He was ready to go along for the ride.
That's why you were the right guy for the job.
Oh my God, I was scared.
You were like, if anybody's gonna find a way to come through a phone and like choke me, it's gonna be Harlan Ellison.
He's a scary guy. But ultimately, I think I never heard from him or about it again. So
that's wonderful.
That was good.
I do remember. It's funny. Maybe my parents did I was about 6 or so years old when the Death of Superman stuff started happening, and maybe my parents did a decent job of like hiding it from me because they knew how much I loved Superman. So I remember seeing some Death of Superman stuff, but it not really clicking with me. I do, however, remember that famous poster with the 4 Supermen. That was, which one is it? Or I can't remember what it said. What did it say?
I don't know. I forgot.
It was like one of these guys is Superman,
which, if
or
any
maybe
of them,
not.
We were honest too. We said which, if any of them, are the real Superman or something.
I remember seeing that because it was the artwork was so striking that even as a 6-year-old, you just like immediately your eye is drawn to it.
You like the elseworldness of it. You like the multiverse of it. You like seeing 4 different Superman costumes.
Yeah,
because when you're a kid, you do want to see something different. And you wanted to see something that was different than your grandfather's Superman. And I think that was an important element of the success of that, because Superboy was an arrogant kid. And that's not what Superman ever was. Even when he was Superboy, he wasn't like that. So it was like, you got to have that difference. The Eradicator was, he was the Punisher, basically. He was definitely the guy who would cross the line. He wouldn't kill anybody, but he would break your arm. And it's like, dude, that's not really Superman, And the Cyborg, he was like half of a monster. I don't know why people didn't suspect that he was the bad guy right from the start.
Maybe they wanted to believe. They're like, maybe this is a bait and switch because he looks so scary. We want to believe that he's actually he's a robot with a good heart. He's like the Tin Man.
I forgot to say spoiler alert. Sorry.
Sorry. Superman does in fact come back.
Spoiler alert. 30 years ago.
Would you say that is maybe the proudest moment of your career? Is that one of? That's got to be one of the top ones.
What, pulling off The Secret?
Pulling off that entire arc
that I knew while it was happening. I knew I'd be talking about it for the rest of my life. I am really happy and gratified that people keep collecting it. They keep putting it out again. And now the Triangle number omnibuses are coming out, and the first
Yeah.
one did really well, apparently. So hopefully there's going to be more of them because I would love.
I bought every copy of it, so I hope it does
Oh,
do
thank
well.
you
Yeah,
very
yeah, it's
much.
all thanks to me.
Well, I guess I owe you a couple of $1,000. But again, I don't. The people who wrote and drew the books, they get money from them. I don't.
Like Donner was like, nobody sent me a copy of the Superman 4K, and I'm like, this makes me sick.
Yeah, that's not right. But again, I have a couple of people over there who still remember me because I've only been gone for a year and a half, and they asked me to write introductions for those books, so that's good.
Yes.
So I guess I got paid for writing the introduction.
Well, I mean, what's great about it too is like, not only for collectors like me, but for people who want to have access to these comic book services, these things are available to you now. And I remember when I started buying the Man of Steel, it was just these little paperbacks you
Uh-huh.
could find at your comic book shop when they were releasing the collected editions, and
Yeah.
it was like $25 a pop for a volume literally this big.
Yeah.
And it was like, how am I going to read all of these? And
Ah,
now things like this, it's like, well, great, now I can just buy giant books. And
well, the part of me, I don't know who's buying them because they're like $150 each. But at the same time, if 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 you like this stuff, then that's what you're going to spend your money on. But I just like that they're available, and they could be in libraries
yeah,
basically.
yeah,
So somebody can get to them if they want them, and I think that that's just great. The fact that when I was buying comics in the '60s, any comic that was 30 years old was the beginning of Superman, you know? And it was like, I'm never going to see these books
yeah,
unless DC puts out a first issue special or something, or the Treasury editions,
right.
and it's like they were so few and far between. I had to have the Jules Pfeiffer book just to see the origins of half the characters out there.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's like, this stuff it's just making it readily available is the greatest thing that has ever happened for comics.
yeah.
That's
I
for
love it.
sure.
As a fan, for me, like historically, it's really, really great to just be able to like go back and read and like just to be impressed because we were talking about Frank Miller came in and exploded the comic book world with the Dark Knight
Mhm.
Returns. The advantage that Frank Miller has with a story like that is he gets to do 4 issues and then he's like, great, gonna move on to something else. You guys had to stick with this story and come up with ideas consistently.
We weren't Frank Miller, I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
he was already at a level that, he got to do some things that he wanted to do, and we were I this is not meant as an insult. Everybody on my team they were journeyman comic creators, They, if anything, they're more famous now just because they were doing those books. And it again, it was not my goal to put a famous guy on the books,
yeah.
And when we got a guy who was, a little bigger name, George Perez, he didn't last on the books that long, you know.
Was
Uh,
it just because of that kind of what you were talking about? Check your ego at the door
no,
and
no, he was not an ego problem at all. He
mm,
wanted to play along. He just was not a speed demon. He couldn't.
I
The
gotcha.
monthly grind was not for him. Not at
Yeah.
that point.
But that takes a talent. That takes a unique talent too. Like we recognize the Frank Millers of the world, obviously, but like sometimes I feel like it is you guys are getting your due now. It's hard. It's a thankless job to do what you guys have to do because you have to churn it out consistently. And only in retrospect can people look back and say, "Wow, what an incredible run." But that's tough.
And not for the editor, but for the people who wrote and drew them. They got thanked when
Mhm.
when those books sold, millions of copies. There was royalties involved.
Good.
There was a lot of convention appearances. They did signings for QVC. There's a lot of they got thanked.
Good. Good. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, it's just nice that it's still going for them.
Yeah, definitely. And
'Cause
some of them are still like they're still working and I mean
Jer
Dan is still
Dan
doing
is still
Superman
doing
stuff.
stuff. Good for
Yeah.
him. I
Yeah.
wish that people would hire. I wish people would call Roger Stern and Jerry Ordway to do stuff, but
Yeah.
everybody's we all fit in a different era. I mean, I even ended up working on the animated cartoons and stopped
Yeah.
editing.
You work on or you were involved with the new the my was it My Adventures with Superman?
Yeah, I mean, I will say like all of the animated stuff comes out of Warner Brothers Animation. And those people are fans of the comic stuff. That's why, the Bruce Timms of the world and the Batman TV show, the Superman animated show, they're as good as they are because the people doing them liked the material. And one of the last things that I was reading was My Adventures with Superman. And they are now apparently working on a third season.
Yeah.
And I have not read any of those, so I'll be seeing them for the first time when I'm just as a viewer. But I'm happy that there's somewhere on the planet where my emails to them when they would send in the scripts and the outlines of what they wanted to do, it was great. I said right off the bat, I said, you guys, you found a way to make this 80-year-old thing feel fresh.
Yeah.
And it was, I was nothing but encouraging to them. And I'm glad that stuff's out there somewhere.
Yeah, me too. What's funny is I remember I tried to watch it. It wasn't the right time for me. And I picked it up more recently and I absolutely adore it. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, if you're going to be rigid, I mean, to me, it's an Elseworld, and that's fine. And that, I think everything is. I think Smallville was an Elseworld.
Yeah.
I think everything is an Elseworld, and you're going to have to reboot Superman every now and then too, because you'll get a new 52. That's an Elseworld to me.
Yep. Yeah. No, I agree. I think, and I just look at it as like, look, put whatever label on it you want. To me, it's the excitement of people who love the material, who have a unique voice, who want to come to it and they have a passion for it. And that for me, as a fan, as somebody who just loves great storytelling, that's what's exciting to me. Is I'm like, let anyone who wants to tell a great Superman story tell it. Whatever you have to label it, if it's the Elseworlds label or something else,
right?
As long as I get to read it, love it, and put it on my shelf someday,
To me, it was all about having options. It's like that all this stuff is there for different people at different times. It's like people were complaining about the Teen Titans Go show because it was too stupid and it didn't match the comics. And I'm like, guys, why can't there be something for your little brother as well?
It's also very funny.
And it's great.
I didn't watch the show. Yeah, I watched the movie that came out, and I was like, "This is fantastic! I can't believe they were making this
stuff in there too."
Yeah, it was kind of a send up of that stuff too, which was great. They were brilliant writing
it
that
is
stuff.
A good show, and you know what? And they even did some episodes that had Marv Wolfman and George Perez in them in the episodes. So it's like that's
so
like a
cool.
blessing from them, saying they get it. And I would defend the show all over the place. I just said, look, this is a hyperbolic version, but every single character is still in character.
Yes.
And they're doing stupid things with their characters, but they are in character. So
exactly.
that we're preserving it. And now somebody will be able to grow up and go on to the Teen Titans animated show from the year 2000 or whenever that was.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, and that's all stuff is all available. You can find all this stuff everywhere. So, and maybe they'll end up reading the comics too.
Yeah.
Which would be great.
Something for everybody. I don't want to take up too much more of your time because this is fantastic. And I could sincerely talk to you all evening, which I will not. I would never torture you with that. But I wanted to ask you, I mean, we've talked about James Gunn, our hopes and our optimism for his films. I mean, he's basically taking on what your role used to be. So if you could advise him, if you had any advice for him, if you could have, what would you have said to him that day on the set? And I'm sure you will get a chance because you deserve it.
Here's my advice, Mr. Gunn. Don't blow it. Really, don't drop the ball. They gave you the ball. Make sure you make the shot. There really is I can't offer advice. It's a different universe. There's a lot of different money at stake. It's definitely not the same thing. He's also going to get at best a movie every 2 or 3 years with Superman in it. I had to fill pages. I had to have a lot of crazy ideas, and a lot of we could take a lot of chances. And we could do things that were running gags that were just for us. It's like when every cab ride in Metropolis costs $6.50. that just made us laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh. We thought that was the funniest thing. And so a couple of fans have figured it out. They just noticed it. And then in Action 700, the price went up to $7 a ride.
That's great.
And then we didn't do that joke anymore.
Right. No, that's brilliant.
I hope they do it in the movie.
They better. That's how you'll know. You're like, this is with the right people. Mike, this has been a genuine pleasure.
Oh, my goodness.
I really am such a massive fan of what you guys did. What you guys did is you kept the legend going.
I appreciate that. And, just tell your friends and keep buying those Triangle era omnibuy. Just don't read them in the tub. They're too heavy. Way too heavy.
If you have, they're good for like if somebody breaks into your house, you can definitely use them as a substantial weapon.
I think that people are going to use them to break into houses. That's what's going to happen.
Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you so much yourself.